The drone came in low over the garden wall, faster than anything that size should move, and I was already running before my mind caught up with my legs. My name is Daniel Hart, and 3 seconds earlier, I had been standing at a colonnade I was not even supposed to be guarding, half asleep, thinking about nothing more important than lunch. Then I saw her hand twitch, 4 arms, and the second one on the left curled inward, just slightly, the way it always did when something frightened her. I had seen that twitch 100 times across a card table. I had never seen it on a terrace full of foreign dignitaries with no reason to be afraid. So I ran. Princess Isleth stood alone on the open terrace, robes catching the wind, greeting a line of Karnasi diplomats who were too busy admiring the palace to notice the machine dropping toward her out of the sun. She noticed. She just did not know how to say it out loud, because on her world, showing fear in front of guests was worse than dying in front of them. I did not care about her world's rules. I closed the last stretch of marble at a dead sprint, grabbed her by the shoulder, and pulled her sideways behind a stone column, half a second before the drone tore through the space where she had been standing. It struck the reflecting pool instead, throwing up a wall of water and sparks, and somewhere behind me, Peter Doyle was already swearing and hurling a maintenance wrench at the thing, like it owed him money. The wrench hit something important. The drone spun once, screamed, and dropped into the pool for good. For a long moment, nobody on that terrace moved. Then the Karnasi delegates started shouting in 3 different languages at once. Palace guards came pouring in from every doorway, and I was still holding onto the arm of a woman who was, technically, going to rule an empire older than my entire species. She looked at me, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked truly rattled. I want to explain how we got to that terrace, because it did not start with danger. It started with cards. 3 months earlier, I had arrived on Isleth's world as part of a small human unit assigned to palace security, one of the first such postings since our 2 peoples had begun speaking to each other at all. Nobody expected much from us. We were new, unfamiliar, low on the long list of species this empire had dealt with over the centuries. We were told to stand at our posts, stay quiet, and not embarrass anyone. The other guards on the palace grounds spoke of the princess, the way people speak of weather they cannot control. Cold, unpredictable, impossible to read. She had stopped attending court games years earlier, stopped dining with nobles who were not required to be there, stopped doing anything that looked like enjoying herself. Some said she had forgotten how. I found out that was not true on a slow afternoon behind the barracks, where my squad had claimed a patch of gravel nobody else wanted and turned it into the only informal space on the entire estate. We played cards there. We tossed an old ball around. We argued over nothing and laughed too loudly, and none of it meant anything beyond the moment it happened. Isleth found us by accident, or so she claimed later. She stood at the edge of that gravel yard in her formal robes, arms folded, watching the way someone watches an animal they have only read about in books. I did not bow properly. I never learned to. I just asked if she wanted to sit down. Her escorts nearly fainted. She sat down before they could object. She was terrible at cards at first. She read every face for hidden meaning, because on her world, that was the entire purpose of a game. Every match, every wager, every friendly contest between nobles was really a quiet negotiation about status and power, dressed up as fun. Losing on purpose could be a message. Winning too easily could be an insult. Nothing was ever just a game. I told her that where I came from, sometimes a bad hand was just a bad hand. She came back the next day to test that idea, then the day after. Within a few weeks, she was slipping away from her duties whenever she could, to sit on an upturned crate in a dusty yard, learning simple games from soldiers who had absolutely nothing to gain from her friendship, and nothing to lose by losing to her. For the first time in longer than she could remember, nobody at that table wanted anything from her, except a fair round and an honest laugh. Word travels fast in a palace built entirely on gossip. Ministers who had never spoken to a human began finding excuses to walk past our yard, frowning at what they saw. One senior advisor filed a complaint claiming that foreign soldiers were corrupting royal behavior. Another quietly suggested our unit be reassigned somewhere far away before the coronation, somewhere that would not embarrass the throne. Isleth ignored all of it. She kept coming back. I asked her once why it mattered so much, spending her free hours with soldiers instead of nobles who could actually help her rule one day. She turned a card over in 3 of her 4 hands and told me that every person she had ever played against since childhood had been keeping score of something. A win against her meant ambition. A loss to her meant weakness. Every game had always been a message wrapped inside a contest, and she had grown so tired of decoding messages that she had simply stopped playing altogether. Then she found a table where losing meant nothing but losing. That was the whole secret. We were not clever. We were not special diplomats sent to charm her. We were just the only people in that entire palace, with nothing to gain from her friendship, and for a woman who had been studied and measured since the day she was born, that made us the safest company in the galaxy. Which brings me back to that terrace, and the drone, and the water still dripping from the shattered pool. Investigators moved fast once the shock wore off. The drone had not malfunctioned by accident. Someone inside the palace had reprogrammed it days earlier, timed to strike during a public greeting, where the blame could be pinned on careless foreign guards or reckless human soldiers, whichever story served best. It was meant to look like an accident caused by our presence, a clean excuse to remove humans from the palace entirely before the coronation, and perhaps remove an inconvenient princess as well if things went far enough. They had not counted on us noticing early. They had not counted on months of card games teaching a group of soldiers to read a set of 4 arms and 1 nervous tell, better than any of her own advisors ever had. The minister behind it was identified within a day, his plan unraveling faster than he could cover it, and the court that had once whispered about foreign corruption suddenly had a much larger scandal to whisper about instead. Isleth stood in front of the full court that following week, steady on her feet, and told every noble in that room exactly why she trusted a handful of human soldiers more than most of the people who had grown up beside her. Not one of us, she said, had ever once tried to read her for advantage. We had simply wanted her to enjoy a good hand, or laugh off a bad one, and nothing more. Nobody argued with her. Nobody dared. A month later, she opened the first hall in the palace's long history, where rank meant nothing at the table, where any noble, any servant, any soldier could sit down together and play without a single hidden meaning attached to the outcome. She asked me to teach the very first class. I stood in front of a room full of nervous nobles, trying to understand why losing on purpose was not required, explaining a simple card game to people who had spent their entire lives treating every contest as a quiet war. It was strange work for a soldier. It was some of the most satisfying work I have ever done. I have read plenty of treaties and agreements written between our 2 peoples since that first posting began. Careful documents full of careful language meant to build trust between worlds that barely understood each other. None of them did as much good, as quickly, as one dusty yard behind a barracks and a deck of cards that never cared who was royalty and who was not. Isleth still beats me at cards more often than I would like to admit. She still tilts that same second arm when she is bluffing, though these days she does it on purpose, just to see if I notice. I always do. What started as one lonely princess, watching strangers laugh from the edge of a gravel yard, ended up changing the way an entire empire treated its own people. And it happened, not because of any grand plan, but because a small group of soldiers simply treated her like a person instead of a piece on a board. That, more than anything, is what she remembered. And that, more than anything, is what saved her life on a terrace with water still falling from a broken pool, on a morning that began like any other, and very nearly ended in tragedy.